without further ado, I would like to introduce Sarah Knowles, MW. Sarah is our buyer for the USA, and she is an absolute Californian wine lover. So good evening, Sarah. Welcome.
Good evening, Anna. Thank you ever so much. Thank you all for being with us today. It's wonderful to do an event on a Sunday afternoon. It's always a nice time to open a good bottle of wine. And I hope you've taken the opportunity to open something special as well. I've, of course, opened a bottle of Cabernet from Frog's Leap, and I'm hoping to drink the rest of it later with some lamb that I put in the oven. So I hope you also have good plans for later to finish off this bottle of wine if you don't quite get through it during this webinar. So I really want to introduce you to two of my favorite people in the Napa Valley. John and the Wine Society go back a long way. John Williams at Frog's Leap has been working with us for many, many years with Frog's Leap. It's always been a winery that we have enjoyed following at the Wine Society because they make some of the most elegant wines in the Napa. John has always been a big believer in dry farming, organic viticulture, and now is looking at biodynamics. And I think that has really rung true for our members and for us as buyers, as something that we also like to prioritize. The wines tend to be incredibly elegant, offer this incredible value, given the Napa price tag that usually comes with the region. So I hope that you as members have a lot of this in your cellar, because these wines also age beautifully. Today, I'm delighted to introduce Rory as well as John, who started working with John a few years ago, and I started hearing about it on my trips out to Napa. So when I was talking to John in the winery, I would hear that Rory was getting more involved and starting to play a bit more of a role and starting to perhaps challenge some of John's ideas around Frog's Leap. And it was a great to sort of hear it bubbling along under the surface. And then last year, I really got to understand that the two of them were now actively very much involved in the winemaking decisions together. And so I thought when we were looking at a Father's Day event, it would be perfect to talk to the two of them as father and son working together at one of our favorite wineries, and to give us an insight into how that is, as well as an insight into Frog's Leap. So without delaying us any further, I will hand over to John and Rory. Thanks again for being with us. We really appreciate it, and we're looking forward to hearing what you're going to tell us. Cheers.
I'm John, because we look a lot alike, and this is Rory. Yeah. And happy Father's Day to all you fathers out there. It is 9 o'clock in the morning here in California, so we have
about time to start drinking.
About time to start drinking.
We're actually a little bit past our usual start.
I'll stop it. Yeah, we don't want to give them the wrong impression right off the bat. But we're delighted to be with you and hope you're having a great day. It's a beautiful day here in the Napa Valley. We've had some really good weather.
Yeah, we have. It's been a beautiful season so far, despite everything else. Almost just bizarrely nice year so far. So
yeah. We have plenty of our troubles in this country right now, but with pandemics and the like, and even worse. But it's a beautiful day in the Napa Valley. We're really glad to be with you guys. The Wine Society has meant so much to us for multiple reasons. Obviously, the business. The opportunity to get into your cellars over the many years, the opportunities to do a couple expedition labels with you, Sarah, which have been lovely and fun for us. And but also, I can't even tell you how much having Sarah come every year and taste through the cellar with us and give us feedbacks about the wine. It's an important. It's a day we mark on our calendar every year as being. So important, and we hope we don't miss this year with all the travel restrictions and so on. So we're counting. We'll have to do a virtual tasting, I believe. Frog's Leap is our family winery.
It's the family winery. It's we are all in on Frog's Leap and have been for a long time.
Yeah. So Rory, you joined what now? 6 years?
Yeah. So I joined officially joined. I guess you could say I started riding around on the forklift and stirring buckets of water at a young age. True, yeah. But officially joined the business with the harvest of 2012 and been working on the vineyard side now since 2013. Thank you, Sarah, for pointing out my influence has been bubbling under the surface, and the coup d'etat's almost complete.
Oh, stop it. There's no chance of that. I'm still the king of the mountain.
Oh, yeah, right.
I think that any of you have had family businesses or father-son working relationships, those relationships have to be built on respect, and And honestly, when Rory came on, he primarily took charge of the vineyard operations and worked right along with the crew for almost 2 years before you started to do any management.
Yeah, no, three complete years doing farm work with the crew every day. And so that was, there's actually no other way to really learn pruning and learn tying, learn the way that grapes actually grow. And so that's now translated into telling my dad what to do with the different blocks.
Well, and honestly, it was so important to do that because when we talk about frogs, we're talking about viticulture. We are so oriented towards the way we grow our grapes. We farm about 80-hectare grapes, or about 200 acres of grapes, primarily here in Rutherford, a little bit up in St. Helena. And so most of our wines are estate grown. Our Sauvignon Blanc, virtually, our Zinfandel, our Merlot, and our Cabernet Sauvignon. We are going to taste the one exception. In fact, it's not a bad idea maybe to get a little wine.
Getting a little thirsty here.
We do make a wine from Chardonnay and down in the Carneros. We do not have any vineyards there, but we have bought these same grapes from Mr. Truchard since 1985. This very same vineyard. So this vineyard was planted in 1979. Frog Leap's a little bit unique. I think we kind of reflect the diversity of the Napa Valley in that we make multiple varieties, and over half of our production is white wine. Our number one wine actually is Sauvignon Blanc. We've made it since we founded the winery in 1981, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But starting with Chardonnay in 1982, and so white wines are a big part of our business. This Chardonnay not only speaks to our commitment to viticulture and that this is organically grown and dry farmed just like our other wines, but also this idea that what we believe is that, and we put it right on our label, balance, restraint, and respect for terroir, that underpinnings what it means to be fine wine. And all those concepts are conveyed by how we grow the grapes.
Yeah, I think it's, well, and I'll give you some credit with this, Dad, because this, the Chardonnay, because we don't directly farm these grapes, and for a long time when we started the winery, we weren't farming any grapes directly, but the principle of the wines that we've been making since the very beginning has been that, focus on balance, focus on elegance, focus on a respect for terroir, and that has come to mean over time for us that, we've gotten more and more involved with the farming. And in the case of the Chardonnay, it's a single vineyard Chardonnay from the Truchard vineyard. It's now going on a 35-year relation.
Damn good too,
and it's not too bad.
I would give this 100 points.
Absolutely, 100 points. Yeah. Since nobody else will give it 100.
Well, that's fair enough.
But Dad, maybe you go through the fermentation style on this, because it's been a little bit unique and has been a real, a boon for us in terms of getting the kind of expression we want out of Chardonnay.
Yeah, well, obviously California Chardonnays in particular, if you guys are familiar with them, know that they wear many coats, and the big style, the one that's the most popular in California, are the very big, blousy, and I'll use pejorative words, I'm afraid, but those that are very oaky and sweet and buttery and heavy, and I call them tropical fruit flavored pancake syrups. They're very popular in this country. They are almost a cocktail. They're not really wine, but they're hugely popular and sell a lot of wine. I couldn't drink them, so why would I make them? I think the other style that's predominated over the years, and one that I pursued for many years, was a pursuit of Burgundy. And those of us who have been inspired, of course, by the great wines of a Chablis or Meursault or Puy-de-Montrachet or whatever. And so inspired by those wines, we tried to copy them, what I would call faux Burgundy style. And that was a path that we were going down for many years as well. Many people are still on that path. We would go to Burgundy regularly, hang out with Dominic Dupont, smoke little French cigarettes, learn about batonnage, give our barrels Francois Frere. We were going to make Burgundy in the Napa Valley. But I think what we've come to learn is that trying to imitate or copy the style of a wine from a different region is really a fool's errand, and takes you down the wrong path.
Yeah, and Dad, I'll say this. One of my first memories to come back into the wine business and start as an adult, as a sentient human, I guess you could say, and coming back into the wine business and really responding to the wines we were making, and kind of exploring, hey, how could this work? One of the first things that we talked about, I remember, was the Chardonnay. This is when I was still in college and just coming back. a couple times a year. I was over on the East Coast, and the Chardonnay was something we kept coming back to, and making the wine. And we were still, when I was in college, we were still making it in the faux Burgundy style. And we'd sit down, at Christmas or over the summer at some point, and we'd smell the wine and we go, too oaky.
Almost Burgundy.
Almost Burgundy, but not quite.
Not right.
But I think it highlighted for me early on an identification of this is a chance for us to be perfectly honest with ourselves. And I think that's one of the biggest advantages of being that family winery, is we get to kind of sit down and be our harshest critics, in other words. But it helped lead us to this style of Chardonnay.
Well, lead is the word. It took a few years, really. But basically, the way this wine is made, it's 100% barrel fermented in brand new French oak. But only for 4 days. That's all the oak this wine has ever seen. It is then aged for 11 to 12 months on its original fermentation lees in concrete. And this allows for this beautiful, leesy sort of reductive style that is very unique. I think it is clearly a California Chardonnay because it's got a little bit of white peach and a little bit of flower in the nose. But really that nice acidity, that tartness, that creaminess that comes from the lees contact. It's a pretty good wine. I hate to tell you.
I think part of making that great, the great California wine is having something that has a little bit of that generosity to it, but has to have backbone, has to have that elegance and balance at the same time, and that's for us always the quest.
So the long and the short of it is, what I believe our wines do is that they are distinctly of the place that we live in, this beautiful Napa Valley, but they respect the traditions of fine winemaking of the regions of the world that inspire us. Here you're looking at a picture of the vine, so that's a little marine layer there, which of course is why the Napa Valley is able to make the kind of wines that they do. Even on our warmest days, it's going to get to 91 degrees Fahrenheit here today, but this morning we woke up to a thick blanket of fog. It's just dissipating now. It is that warm air rising that brings in the cool air off the ocean and allows for this region. If you put Napa Valley in Europe, it'd be below Barcelona, Spain. So our latitude is southerly. We get a lot of sunshine, a lot of warmth, but it is the proximity to the ocean which allows you to make it. And with respect to the Chardonnay, the closer you are to the ocean, the cooler it is. And so we see a tremendous temperature difference from the top of the Napa Valley to the bottom of Napa.
I mean, that's the kind of the primary geographic lesson of Napa is it gets cooler at the bottom, it's hotter at the top, with lots of little microclimates in between. But even areas like Carneros can sneak in a delicious Merlot here.
Well, add soil to the mix because of, and we put it right on when you'll see the new, we modified our label a little bit with the 18 Chardonnay. We actually put the shale and stone on it, indicating that this wine is grown in decomposed shale. Yeah. So moving on though.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely move on to this. We've got the 17 Zinfandel here with us. And, Dad, Zinfandel was actually the first red wine that you ever made here.
Well, it allows me to speak a little bit of my history in the Napa Valley. I came to Napa originally in 1975 on the Greyhound bus, if you will, from across country. I grew up back east on my family's dairy farm, went to Cornell University to learn how to, I was thinking about becoming a vet. I ran out of money. I got a job working in a winery. I fell in love with the idea of wine and literally packed my bags, got on a bus, took 5 days to get across country and come to the Napa Valley, and decided to make my way here. Well, any of you who are know the history of California, this was really at the nascent stage of the realization that we could make great wines in the Napa Valley. And I was here for that. I became the first winemaker at Stag's Leap Wine Cellars. And so I started making Cabernet Sauvignon in the Napa Valley in 1975. And so I've had a wonderful chance to see history unfold, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. But Zinfandel was a passion of mine from the very beginning. I know that you guys had a session with Joel Peterson, and he talked about some of those early days. I was just part of that as well, Joe Swan and the early Ravenswoods and Ridge and so on. And all those pointed to a style of Zinfandel that was more of a, can we say claret style? I'm not even sure.
I think it gets to claret styles, it gets a little bit older, but that, I think for me, this is, I've always felt that Zinfandel, because Zinfandel was the main grape planted on the ranch that my brother and sister and I grew up on. It was the first ranch that we ever converted to organics. It's now Tres Sabores Winery, my mom's winery, which I also farm that vineyard on my Sundays.
Yeah, it's very tight. You better get up there.
We actually grew up there right now. But the Zinfandel I've grown up with it, and for me, it's it's always been about Zinfandel being this kind of distillation of just a pure joy of wine. Zinfandel, if it's not happy, then it's not Zinfandel. It's not good Zinfandel.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be this heavy, plodding kind of, you know, boring wine.
Knock you over the cave, knock you over the head.
Drag you into the cave. No. The Zinfandel should sing, and it should just be absolutely the embodiment of everything that's joyful and generous about wine. And I think that the 17 definitely has that. 17 was a very hot year, and so there was a little bit of danger of things being out of balance.
Hot year.
One of the hottest years of all we've ever seen. But
it is really, I think, difficult to understand the Napa Valley, where we can grow Zinfandel, this really warm climate grape, and Chardonnay, this very cool climate grape, in the same place. And if you apply the knowledge you have of Burgundy or Bordeaux, we're smaller than both of those regions, and yet the diversity of soil, the diversity of microclimate, really throws an emphasis on understanding your vineyards, your soil types, why we can grow Merlot just a few feet away from Cabernet Sauvignon. And yet, if you put those in the wrong place, you would end up with an inferior product. So you really have to be in touch with the viticulture of these vines. And you have to farm them in a way that takes advantage of that. That's why we became early proponents of organic viticulture. We found out that the extra vigor that comes from fertility out of fertilizer really threw our grapes into the wrong place. And so we not only started to farm organically, but we've always dry farmed. So here's a picture. Maybe you can tell people a little about
absolutely.
what's going on.
So you're looking at a rootstock vine is the part, the big part there, essentially, with the foliage on top, a rupestris vine called St. George. And what our lead budder, Freddie Coro, is putting in a single bud of Cabernet Sauvignon into that root. And so the way that we've always farmed is always planting rootstock separately into the soil, allowing it to grow for an entire season, and then inserting a bud and field grafting whatever variety it is onto that root directly. We do that by hand for all of our vineyards, and it's the kind of skill set that we cherish, that we value, that we pay highly for, and that has been really at the core of our winery. Because you said it, that Napa is this very special place. If you can imagine, California is very famous for its earthquakes. Well, that same kind of activity, over the eons, you have two plates crashing into each other and essentially throwing all of their accumulated soils into a blender and then spitting it out on top. And you have this incredible diversity of soil that is just really can be extremely expressive. And you combine that with climate, if you're willing to respond to it. And so for us, dry farming has really been at the core of that, because all of these different soils are going to have different accessibility to water. They're going to have different accessibility to nutrients in the soil. And if the point of wine is to express that kind of heterogeneity and that kind of the differences, and be really in tune with what makes that particular piece of soil different and unique, it's that your farming has to match that. And so dry farming, this version of farming grapes, allows the grapes to be in tune with the soil that they are in. We're not trying to standardize the amount of water across an entire block. You can walk through a block of our Cabernet Sauvignon or Zinfandel vines, and you'll see some vines that are very big. Maybe they're in a very vigorous spot with lots of nutrients, lots of water in that soil. And not even 20 meters away, you'll see a vine that's very small, that has limited soil. Maybe there's a little patch of gravel there, or a little patch of sand. That you got
to celebrate that as opposed to try to
Exactly. The trick is finding the correct farming style that balances each vine for where it is in that little patch of soil. And it really does get down to the granularity and just the sense of purpose in allowing these vines to be different, and finding each vine's own particular balance. For us, that means a permanent vineyard crew. We don't bring in any seasonal crews or any migrant labor. We have a permanent in-house full-time crew with full benefits for our vineyard operations and our cellar operations. And that California really has this beautiful accumulated knowledge of vineyard expertise, and that is something that flies under the radar a lot. I think in California, it's not often talked about.
Well, I don't think viticulture in general is talked about. I mean, and look, some of these concepts sound radical: organic farming or dry farming, not irrigating our grapes. But I want to point out that historically, Napa was not irrigated. When I got here in 1975, every single vineyard was dry farm. Irrigation did not come to the Napa Valley until 1976. It didn't become popular until the 80s, the 90s, almost every year. And now literally winemakers will look at you and say, you can't farm grapes in the Napa Valley. 97% of the grapes in the Napa Valley now are irrigated, and sometimes heavily irrigated. We think that disconnects the vine from the soil and shouldn't be allowed. But when you think of all the great and fundamental wines that established the reputation of the Napa Valley, many of you know these wines, the great Inglelooks and Beaulieu's and the Robert Mondavi wines of the early times, the Stag's Leap Cabernets that I made and bottled in the mid 70s. Every one of those wines were from dry farm vineyards. This is a relatively recent concept, and I think most of you know that irrigation is not allowed in the other great wine growing regions of the world for the singular reason that they disconnects the vine from. It tends to overproduce grapes. It tends to produce wines that then become about the winemaking technique as opposed to the terroir. We are fundamentally opposed to that, and so what we believe in wine, balance, restraint, and respect for the natural expression of the vine, start fundamentally with the way we grow the grapes. And it builds climate resistance and a number of things. I think it points out the 17 vintage, which was perhaps a foreshadow of
years to come.
Years to come.
And it really shows up in years like 2017, which was an extreme year as far as climate goes.
I'm going to get us another glass.
Well, we can just dump it off.
Oh, yeah. That's my coffee.
Yeah, so what? We make a little red coffee.
Well, I'll use my white one. I'm not throwing away the Zinfandel. I'm not that the Chardonnay is delicious.
I think what you get, part of what I really love about the Zinfandel is when you get that kind of heterogeneous expression of Zin, it steers away from a lot of your prior notions of Zinfandel, which is it's going to be it's going to be super jammy, it's going to be heavily alcoholic, it's not going to have any complexity, it's just going to be bone basic fruity wine. And really, when you start to emphasize the heterogeneity of wine and you get away from that kind of standard flavor, I'm getting floral aromas out the boat with 17 right now. Yeah. I would give this 100 points. Easily 100 points. Could be. We really should start a review magazine. We review only frog sleep wine.
Well, and they're all 100 points.
Review, yeah.
Delicious wine, and what we want to tell you about our Zinfandels is do not be afraid of putting these in the cellar, because the very same things that make these wines so beautiful when they're young are what build the structure and the balance and the integrity that allows these wines to age in the cellar. And we have absolutely no problem of holding Zinfandels, Merlots, and Cabernets 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. I mean, I've had Inglelooks from the.
Have you never been able to sell any wine?
Well, that's it. With their current release and you're 30 years old, you got a problem.
Speaking of Cabernet,
yes,
let's pour ourselves a glass.
We are sitting in the middle of Cabernet in Rutherford here, right outside these windows. It is some of the most beautiful land for Cabernet Sauvignon in the Napa Valley. It's very important to know because now it's become, Napa has been synonymous with Cabernet Sauvignon as the famous Paris tasting. I bottled that wine, I know. And in this rush to Cabernet, I think is problematical because not all the Napa Valley is proper for Cabernet Sauvignon.
Exactly. The photo that you're actually seeing here, that is Sauvignon Blanc that's being shoot thinned or suckered. This is just a few weeks ago.
But why would you grow Sauvignon Blanc when you can grow Cabernet Sauvignon?
Because the taker of this photo is standing in clay soil. That is not the kind of classic gravelly loam, as opposed to the soil that you're looking at here with My Little Dog series.
So those are younger vines, or are they just less vigorous vines?
Both.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's
where's my dog, by the way?
Yeah, where's your dog? Your dog's, I think, late lounging inside.
No, that's not true.
Only my dog's brave enough to get out there in the sunshine. But understanding that those soil types, because Napa is so mixed up and so diverse and so interesting with that soil type, you just the same way you can't have water be the same or temperature the same, the soil is not the same, and the variety should not be the same across the board. California is organized into geographical appellations. The within Rutherford, you can grow anything from Sauvignon Blanc to Riesling to, I think there's some peak pool over by the river. I mean, you can grow whatever you want. And that's one of the major advantages of California, is that you can grow whatever you want, and it's up to you to make good on your crazy idea.
Well, it's good and bad.
Well, I think it's mostly good as long as you're asking questions about where and why something.
But people don't. I mean, you know where we grow our Sauvignon Blanc. All 4 vineyards on all 4 sides are growing Cabernet Sauvignon, and you go, what? Why would you plant Cabernet Sauvignon in these soils? It's not proper for Cabernet. And what's their answer?
Money, money, money.
Well, yeah, you can make more money growing bad Cabernet than you can great Sauvignon Blanc. Not cool, in our opinion, right? And so you have to match the grape to the soil.
And it is really a shame, Dad, just because Cabernet, when it's grown in the right spot, when it's treated with respect and made, really, I think the word is with honesty. Honest Cabernet from Napa is capable of one of the highest expressions of terroir in California. I think it is. It can be really fabulous. An older Cabernet from Rutherford is what drew me back into the wine business. I remember I was actually doing a stage in Barolo, and I'd been in Barolo for about 5 months, all through the harvest, drinking literally nothing except Arnay, Stolcetto, Nebbiolo, and Barbera. Nothing else. Not even any Tuscan or French wine. Just the Barolese wines. And it was pretty interesting, because I brought 1 bottle of California Cabernet, Frogsley 99 Rutherford Cabernet, with me to share with
because they didn't know you were from a winemaking family, even. Right?
They actually didn't, which was kind of funny. I never mentioned it. They just thought I was some California kid who didn't know Italian very well.
Which was true.
That was very true. But I, showed up with this bottle of California Cabernet, just said, "Hey, this is, from my home," but I had not had any California wine for a 5-month stretch, probably the longest stretch in my life.
Well, except between 1 and 5 years old.
1 and 5 months old. But after that, it was a pretty regular application. But I remember being in the situation of being so accustomed to this different kind of flavor set and different kind of culture, and then tasting 1 sip of Rutherford Cabernet. And the thought in my mind wasn't, hey, the blackcurrant's really nice in this wine, or the cedar and all that. No, the balance. The thought was home. My first thought was that my brain was dragged 6,000 miles back home. And I think that kind of expression,
are you choking up?
To me, that's something. To me, that's something worth doing. I think that wine is capable of transporting you through time and space, and it's when it does that, it elevates itself and it elevates you as a drinker. It really is what provides that meaning over time. And I'll never forget that wine. It's fun to go back to it. But winemaking is that quest for making wine that tastes like home to somebody. I'm not from Chablis. I'm not from Cligny-Montrachet. I'm not from Pauillac. But what I love about those wines is when they're really good, they taste like, man, I can see somebody feeling this connection with this place. And I think that a lot of that distills down to what we try and do here, and why it's really fun to work as a family in this business, is that it really carries that kind of meaning forward. And you realize that that flavor is not just wrapped up in the father, son, or owning the winery or anything like that, or even a winemaker. It's that I work now with people in the cellar, Pablo, our cellar master, who I've known since I was 5 years old. He's been an employee of Frogsley for 30 years.
I think he's running the place.
It pretty much is running the place. His daughter Sochi is now in college studying winemaking. That kind of multi-generational aspect to wine is just what makes it special, and it allows that connection to home. And I think it's lovely because it takes you so far away from that kind of, corporate boardroom decision making about wine and just this treatment of it as a commodity, basically.
Well, and I hope you can smell it in this wine, because honestly, we haven't done our job unless you can. And of course, this is the greatest thrill of winemaking, is when you gain a familiarity with that wine, so much so that when you smell it, it literally transports you in time and space.
Maybe not literally.
Well,
then it's got some. That's something really weird going. You got some.
Well, you have to drink the whole bottle.
That they put some mushrooms in there. It might be literally.
Okay, so that's a different
story. That's a whole.
Okay, figuratively. No, what's the word? Metaphorically.
Metaphorically.
Yes, and literally, honestly, for me, picks you up and puts you back, because I am out of the body at that point. And I think that's what's great about wine. It's drives us to make the kind of wines that explore that. And I have to say, I wish that were more common in the Napa Valley today. I wish it were more common in the world of wine, where we have gotten into this mindset of how many points and what famous wine writer is going to give it this, and who's the winemaker seems to be a bigger question now than what's your soil type, right? And we think that's going in the wrong direction. So I think the only thing that we can really guarantee you, if you buy a bottle of Frog's Leap, and operators are standing by, Sarah tells me, to take orders. We appreciate the support. The only thing we can guarantee you is that we, as long as we are here, and Alma's going to join us in a second or not, I don't know. The next generation is coming. Is as long as we're here, we will continue to put our passion to making wines that demonstrate those principles. And so you can be assured that if it says Frog's Leap on the label, that is the passion that drives these wines.
If you like the wine, then he made it. Or if you like the wine, I made it. If you don't like the wine, then you made it.
We're gonna have to change the script just a little bit. Yeah. Sorry, have we put people to sleep back there, Sarah, or are people still with us?
Not at all. I think
watching, so we know we've gone over 5 minutes.
No, watching the two of you talk, it's clear that your boardroom meetings are definitely more fun than mine. I think the way you're bouncing off each other is wonderful. I'm sure that adds such a great dynamic to the winery and to your whole team. It must be great for everyone.
It's all right.
Could be a lot better.
It could be a lot better.
Yeah. Well, terrible.
We have many problems.
It was one of the comments you made earlier. I love the idea that over dinner, outside of work time, when we're meant to be talking about other things, you're there discussing the nuance of the Chardonnay and the difference of the Cabernet and the oak treatments. And I think that's something that with a family business, you sort of never leave the office. So it's we're all discovering.
He spends a good deal of time criticizing my cooking too. So
well, it's because I'm a better cook than you are.
Well, now here we go.
It's just natural,
You better cut us off, Sarah.
So I'm going to kick off the questions. We've had lots in from members, but I had one too, and we've had a little chat about it outside of this more professionally. But I know that some members have been commenting on your exhibition labels that you mentioned earlier, and they've been asking if there's an opportunity for more to come. And I was saying that I very much hope so, perhaps with another Merlot or a Cabernet to come in the next year or so. Yeah. How's that sort of looking from your point of view?
We always look for that opportunity because you're choice number one, because you guys are very generous with us and having provided and these are often very, very beautiful wines. Sometimes they reflect the marketplace. And Sarah, I sent you an email earlier this week saying with the economic conditions across the country, we very prudently based our business on selling our wine to fine restaurants around the world. But in this country, every single restaurant is essentially closed down. So we may have more wines available for exhibition than we've had in the past. That's why you come out and you taste these wines. But she's a tough customer. I want you guys to know this. We can't pass any crap over on her. We have to give as much respect to our exhibition label as we do our regular label, or she'll call us out. You're tough. Pierre used to be a pushover, but you're tough. Yeah,
I'm not sure. I think I'm often a pushover, but I'm always delighted when it's your wine I'm trying. So,
I'm assuming.
We look forward.
I'm assuming Pierre's not listening.
All right, he is a pushover. No. So I think that should be an exciting thing. I've also seen a comment in the chats that I might be able to help on, because we've got 2 vintages of your current Zinfandel. We've got the 17 and the 18. And members were a little confused because I had one selling and then they've swapped over. And it's really something that I try to do with your wines, is that I actually try to hold a little bit back. So I really believe that we have aging potential. And at the Wine Society, we're really lucky as buyers to have a keeping stock budget. And so we're able to hold wines back to sell at a time when we know members will be able to enjoy them having had a bit of aging. So it's the 2 vintages in is because I was holding a little bit of stock back. But for this event, I wanted to make sure that you had the widest range possible available. So they will only be available for a few weeks at this point. And then I'll be hiding them again to try and keep a little bit and get some age on some. And then they'll come back in a fine wine American offer at some point soon. So no, to
Well,
members.
I would say, Sarah, that if they're trying to decide between the two, if there's any thought to putting it into the cellar, I don't know how you feel about this, Rory, but I would buy the 18 for the cellar and the 17 if you're thinking of drinking it within the next 5 or 10 years. The 17 would probably be proper, but if you're thinking of you love, like we do, a wine that can go 20 or 30 years as Zinfandel, then I would look to the 18.
I think the 18 has got that kind of life in it. You know, right now the 18 for me, I just had it the other night, and it's just this peak of exuberance right now. I think also if you love the kind of almost crude Beaujolais-ness of Zinfandel when it's at its peak,
yeah,
that's what the 18 is doing right now. That's going to quiet down a little bit, and it'll start to develop more complexity. Whereas the 17 now is very floral. The fruit is very, very smooth. I think it's a little more resolved and a little more complex right now. But the 18 is just that kind of peak joy. I think it's one of the best Zinfandels we've ever made. So it's I'm a big fan of the 18.
And honestly, I think we can say almost the same thing. We've got the 16 Cabernet Sauvignon, and this is a cellaring wine. But you've got, I think the 17 is either on its way or you must have it in by now. The 17 is definitely just got all that joy of drinking to it, and I will probably drink most of my 17 in the next 10 years, whereas the 16 and the 18 on the other sides of that 17 vintage, which was a really warm vintage for us, very generous. But this is the joy, and honestly, the approach we take to winemaking is, instead of trying to make all those vintages taste the same, is to actually put that character of the vintage as part of the terroir, right? I think you know that, and is very much celebrated in Europe. In Napa, all vintages are great, right? And well, yes, they can all be great, but they are different. They have different characteristics. Celebrate that difference as opposed to try to even it out, is our opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So
in which case, Sarah, are you happy for me to jump in with some member questions, if that's all right?
Oh,
Yeah.
she's still awake. We thought you'd gone to sleep already.
No, I'm here. Don't worry. I'm actually enjoying the 2018 Zinfandel, and it is absolutely fantastic. So yeah, if members haven't had a chance to get their hands on that yet, I would highly recommend it myself. I'm going to ask the first question on behalf of a member. I have to say, Robert Walker, you emailed us earlier with the most poetic question we've ever had. Lots of references to Robert Louis Stevenson, and in particular the load of earth that he references about California. Robert's question was, which of the 3 elements do you think is most important in producing a quality wine? Is it the grape growing? Is it the load of earth? The terroir, the French might call it, I suppose. Or is it the winemaking? Which of those 3 things do you think is most important, particularly for your wines?
I would say yes, but you would say?
Yeah, I mean, so it's a little difficult to say because, yeah, this load of earth, and I think that because grape growing, I think is maybe sometimes thought about as this kind of top-down thing where you're imposing the vines upon the soil, and you have the control of this vineyard, right? And I'm the vineyard manager, so I have control of this vineyard. I'm the master of this vineyard. And really, true grape growing, that kind of the kind of grape growing that has respect for terroir, is a developing understanding and really an accordance with that particular load of earth. And really, that kind of understanding is developed over the last several years to understand that it's not just about the mineral content or how much nitrogen is in that soil or the water holding capacity of a particular soil, these kind of technical metrics that we have, but also the promotion of health of soil health. So the microflora in the soil and the way that the bacteria and microorganisms in the soil are not just congeners to your grape growing. They're actually doing the bulk of the heavy lifting.
Well, above the ground biodiversity in your farm.
Biodiversity at all points, and I think that grape growing is extremely important because, properly understood, it is this symbiotic relationship with the load of earth. Winemaking is important, and I think
I'll speak to the winemaking since I'm still the winemaker if I can.
Oh, okay, sure.
Gee whiz. to me, winemaking is almost a Zen-like experience. The best winemaking is that does the least. But you have to have the other two first, the grape growing and the load of earth or the terroir. That is what allows you to be a proper winemaker who does nothing. And most of what winemaking is correcting problems that came from forcing the terroir or the lack of, or covering over for that, having to add character to the wine out of the winemaking process that would have been inherently in that had we grown it properly in the right soil and developed that character in the grape growing process. So so our answer is these three things are intricately, say that word for me.
Intricately connected, and it's, humans are part of that understanding. And grape growing is not just me, the vineyard manager, saying, hey, this is the right variety in that soil, but some of the really seemingly banal things like leaf pulling and a proper pruning job and a proper way of training the grapes, a proper way of tying, proper way of just planting the grapes in the first place.
Yeah.
That kind of understanding is really a knowledge built over time of how grapes grow in any particular spot. And that kind of knowledge is not learnable in a university. It's an experience-based kind of thing. And so grape growing, proper grape growing only develops endemically to a particular area, that it's autochthonous to a particular region, and that that necessarily involves this load of earth, a proper understanding and a proper care for a particular piece of soil. And so, yeah, I mean, obviously the answer is yes. It's hard to say which one is first and foremost, but I think
they build on each other.
They build on each other, and it's.
Did you get the literary reference to Robert Louis? You went to Robert Louis Stevenson Middle School.
I did, and he wrote the whole book, Sobrato Squatters, and has a.
Right. Yeah, he lived just a few miles.
You can't. No, you can't.
But the particular passage that he was talking about, the load of earth. Had you read that?
No, not before.
Okay, we need that reference, Anna.
I'll ask Robert to share it with us. But it was a really, really beautiful question. But I'll forward you his question as well. But I'll ask Robert Walker exactly where he got it from. I think he might possibly be a big fan. If it's all right, we do have another question, and a member is hopefully going to be able to ask it themselves. We have unmuted Keith Hopcroft. Keith, are you there?
I am.
Hello, Keith. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening. Good evening, Robert.
I visited your vineyard back in 1998, actually, and I must say it was the most hospitable and least pretentious vineyard of all in the valley that I visited. I've been a fan of your wines ever since, and I'm drinking a 2011 Zin at the moment, which is delicious. My question actually refers to climate change. One, I mean, how are you affected by it? Have you noticed it? And two, with the wildfires that we hear about, have you been affected by those? And how do you prevent or avoid calamity in the future if these things continue?
Yeah, for us, I think it's.
Oh, why not? Why not just a simpler question the next time, Robert?
It's an extremely important question, and it's a question in the States that unfortunately has become heavily politicized. For us, it's not a political question. It's a fact. For me, it was talking with the guys on our vineyard crew and hearing from them. Yeah, the vines are waking up on average earlier every year. They just seem ready to go. The buds are getting cottony. The buds are coming out earlier than usual. To me, that's the full indication there. And, that has tremendous effects, small changes in temperature with tremendous effects. And I think that it's hard to know. It's hard to know whether the drought years we've had and the extreme heat events and things like that we've had over the last several years are, hey, is that climate change? Is that just something?
Weather, yeah.
Is that just weather? I think it's less important for me to point to any particular event of any particular growing season and pointing at it and saying that's climate change than it is to just say that this is a fact, that this is established by science. There's not much controversy to it in my own mind. And so what can we, more importantly than thinking about what's going to happen to our Cabernet, which, you clutch your pearls and wonder what's going to happen to your Cabernet, we'll figure it out from that perspective, including alternative varieties, different. We feel like our vineyards are pretty well set up to be resilient to changes in climate with the way that they're connected with their soil. But a lot of it comes back to, what can we do as a company? And that means, you'll pick up one of our empty wine bottles and you'll notice that they're not as heavy as your typical Napa Cabernet. Well, shaving 100 grams of weight off of your wine bottle goes a very, very long way towards actually mitigating climate change. Dry farming, not irrigating, not spreading water on the surface of soil in the middle of a hot, dry summer allows, which when you do that, you have a tremendous release of nitrous oxide, a very potent greenhouse gas. We're going to be demoing a prototype of an electric tractor this fall from Monarch Tractors, something that has not yet been achieved.
Well, we've produced all of our own power for years using
solar power, conservation of water, all of these kinds of elements where it's really less about, for us, the operational question of what's going to happen to our Cabernet is secondary to what can we actually do about it and what can we demonstrate to others that's really not that hard to do. Choose a lighter bottle for your Cabernet. And as consumers, ask questions. Why am I picking up this bottle of Cabernet and it's empty, but it feels full? And I put it on the scale and it weighs a full kilo. Maybe that makes me feel very manly. And wow, this Cabernet was really big. The bottle was really big. But that is what is actively destroying and actively compromising our ability to fight climate change. Things like that.
And look, the only thing I would add to this, Robert, is as a man who's about ready to have his 68th birthday, is that we have to be very careful not to trivialize this discussion into what's going to happen to grapes in the Napa Valley. At the point that grapes are no longer valuable in the Napa Valley, the devastation to humanity is going to be intense. We're talking at the same time about desertification and displacement and global economic collapse and the extinction of millions of species. So we can't make this a problem of Napa Valley vineyards. Yes, we're going to do our part, but this is a problem of humanity. We are imposing this upon the earth, and we individually, everyone listening to this, has a responsibility to do what we can to change that. So don't make this the problem that someone else has to solve. It's something we all have to do individually. Yes,
and that holds true for us as a wine
very,
business.
very much so. We are part of the Porto Protocols, which has a simple directive. They say, if you're doing nothing, do something. If you're doing something, do a little bit more. If you're doing a fair amount, find new ways to challenge ourselves. That's where we're at right now, finding new ways to challenge ourselves. If you're out there doing nothing, do something. If you're doing a little bit, do a little bit more. I think that's much more profound than how
the Cabernet will be fine. I guess.
And enjoy a good bottle of properly made, properly farmed, properly packaged Cabernet Sauvignon at the end of the day. That should be our reward for being citizens of this earth.
And a good reward it is
too.
That
got a little profound, don't it?
Yeah, I was going to say it's lovely to hear winemakers talk about broader than just the stuff you put in the bottle. So I appreciate that. And we've got a couple of quick fire questions. So I'm going to ask. I think I'll ask some of these on people's behalf, if that's all right. Gavin emailed earlier and he said that his wife and he were lucky enough to discover Frog's Leap when they met 21 years ago. And they said, they asked, are they imagining it, or are the ribbits disappearing from your corks?
Imagine it, because they are there. But I think if we take this as kind of a more modern cork of Frog's Leap, you'll notice on the barn doors of the barn, it'll say ribbit on there. And so it's always on there. We like to hide it sometimes, just as little, I guess they're Easter eggs for
I can't see them anymore, but
oh, well, no. I think you have plenty of...
They need to use their readers.
Yeah, they need to use the readers.
I think you have plenty of fans who've spotted all your little Easter eggs over the years, so they'll be pleased to know they're not going anywhere. I've also got another question from Mark Churchhouse, and apologies, Mark, I will just ask on your behalf as we're a little short on time. But you obviously spoke earlier about you have some estate wines and then you do buy grapes from further down south, etc. How do you manage those vineyards, and how do you make sure that the quality is tip top?
Well, I think that comes back to developing a relationship. You know, the traditional format of winery being separate from a growing situation that could have existed in California for a long time. I think it's really just been the last many years that people have taken on more of estate programs, with a few key exceptions. But you know, in the case of the Chardonnay, which is bought from the Carneros region, which is about a 20-minute drive south from where we're at right now. How do you maintain quality is that we've known the Truchard family for 30 years, and all kinds of, you know, in the same way that growing your own grapes is a relationship with that piece of land, is a relationship with the people on our vineyard crew who are actively have their hands on those blocks every year. The relationship with a grower, the relationship with a piece of land, it's the same block of Chardonnay, the same actual vines for the last 30 years. And it is a single vineyard wine. And so, you know, when I go down there to sample, and I think this is key, Dad, maybe across everything, is that we don't have interns sample our grapes. We don't have interns walk our grapes. My dad and I walk the grapes ourselves. We go out there and we are making decisions, making picking decisions, making management decisions, talking with in the case of the Chardonnay, talking with Tony Truchard about, hey, Tony, you know, we're looking at this. What do you think about that? We'd love to start picking here in these particular rows because the flavors here are spot on. Whereas even 10 rows below that, it's, you know, we're going to hold off for a few days. And your knowledge of that Chardonnay vineyard is unparalleled. I mean, you've got it. Well, no, it's this little 10 acre piece, and you've got it split up in like 20 different ways.
Well, so it is building a relationship, even though you don't own a vineyard. But literally, unless the grower had that intense relationship with his vineyard, he or she wouldn't be our grower either. So not only do we have to have that relationship with the vineyard, but we have to choose, in this case, and this is really the only wine we're talking about that we don't grow ourselves. We have to know that grower has that relationship with his vineyard as well. So it's a twofold part. Whereas opposed to our growing it ourselves, it's a one part. We have to have the relationship. In this case, we have to have that relationship with the vineyard, and the grower does as well. So it makes it a little bit more complicated, no doubt about it.
No doubt about it. But you know, as with anything, it's a conversation, it's a relationship.
We don't have simple answers to any of these questions. I apologize.
That's all right. That's why when I said I had some quick fire questions, and the quick fire element's gone out the window. But I think we've probably got time for two more questions. The first is from Graham, who's actually watching from California. So we've got a few people watching from California, which is fantastic. And Graham has asked if there's any grape varietals that you are thinking about exploring in the future. So, for example, he said Viognier.
Let's see. So
that wouldn't be one.
That wouldn't be one, but it's you know, we, in addition, not tasting it today, but we have a small I guess what you'd call an experimental block right outside the front door here, right in between some Cabernet blocks, of what we call our heritage block. So the first photo that you guys put up on there of the kind of old vines, the head train vines, those are actually Valdegay vines planted in the 1940s that we've maintained, and we actually co-ferment with a bunch of odd varieties, things like Charbonneau, Carignan, Mourvèdre, Riesling, Mongoose, things like that, that for us are just kind of experimental and an exploration of the tremendous kind of viticultural history and kind of almost a cultural terroir of wine growing in California. And as a part of that project, we've got 4 rows that are going to be grafted over to Grenache this fall. Have I told you that?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
But I think I will add to that not only looking and Rory's brought this to the winery, not only looking into our past for varieties that have done well in the Napa Valley. All those varieties were more planted than Cabernet Sauvignon when I arrived here, okay, and now gone out of. So we're looking to those past. We're also working with UC Davis on 2 new varieties that have just been literally developed to have Pierce's disease resistance in them. So we're on both ends of this. Varieties that have never been planted commercially that we're trying, and old varieties that were here years ago that mate lend. And so look, Frog Sleep is 40 years old this year. There's a lot of history, a lot of tradition to rest on. But if you sit and rest on those parameters of production, you will
dinosaurs will die.
You will fossilize. Yeah. So you have to keep vibrant. You have to keep energetic. You have to keep exploring new ideas. You have to say when your Chardonnay isn't pleasing you anymore, we need to change. And that's got to be part of a vibrant winery. And you see this all over the world. The wineries that produce the greatest wines are those that are constantly exploring the whole world of wine and to be in. So you need to taste wines from other areas. You need to go visit those areas as well. Yeah. And that's a big part of it. Yeah.
Thank you, John and Rory. It's been a huge insight tonight. Thank you so much. And I've got an interesting last question for you that I'm going to introduce our tastings team manager, Tim, to ask. You might see on your screen members, I'm sure you recognize Tim, but Tim is celebrating, as I believe Rory is, his first Father's Day as a new father. And so over to you. But Rory, John, from me, thank you so much for today. I always love seeing you and talking to you both. The wines are looking delicious. Members, fill your booth. And I look forward to seeing some samples of the next exhibition wine. But Tim, over to you to take it away.
Thanks, Sarah, and thank you, John and Rory. So this is little Ollie, who's 11 weeks old. But we've had a few members mentioning that they were meeting up with their families to join tonight's conversation. So I just thought I'd put a father and son combination, and Rory, with you having a little one. How have you found it working with your father, and then with new generations, what is the succession plan in conversations like?
Well, like I said earlier, the takeover is almost complete, and I've almost shoved my dad out of the business. Can't come fast enough.
Yeah, be careful. He's already plotting against you, Tim. It's something we've seen in Napa. I've seen in Napa with friends I grew up with who, whose families owned wineries back in the day and have been slowly kind of drifting away from the wine business. I think that family wineries are in danger in California. It's difficult to make those transitions. And part of it just comes with the fact that winemaking is at least my understanding of it and my experience of it, winemaking is all in. This business is all consuming. I'm literally thinking about grapes every single day. You're getting phone calls in the middle of the night about a tractor being broken down. You're up, obviously harvest is this kind of crazy, exciting, emotional time. But right now we're actually in the busiest time of the season, hours wise, trying to keep up with the vines growing. I love it. I think that if you don't love it, then it is a very challenging business. And the ability to have somebody with as much experience as my dad and as much emotion poured into the historical wines of Frog Sleep and the kind of ethos behind their making for me is incredibly special. And it means that, giving that the winery already has a lot going for it, and helping to give that winery permanence and giving it providing the multi-generational aspect is, I think, something that you've cultivated for a long time, and not just in terms of ownership. It's in the vineyards, in the cellar, in the administration of the winery. We've got multiple generations of families working for Frog Sleep, and I love it. I mean, it's the very nature of something being all consuming can be challenging sometimes, but the reward, which is when, folks like you guys tuning in today, are sharing, you're at home, you're sharing the wines with your family, you're sharing time with us. That's what it's all about. The ability to spread and spread happiness and enjoy time and place with other people through wine. It's very difficult to do that. I'm not unaware of how difficult it is to do that with wine. And so it's the ability to just participate in that continuum is sorry, is that trademarked? Oh, might be.
It might be trademarked these days. But it's you know, the ability to kind of participate and be a steward of that timeline is incredibly special. So I love it, even if I've got to teach him everything about winemaking.
Oh my God, here we go. Yeah. Well, and we got little
Thanks,
Almond,
guys.
read
I think that's a lovely answer, and it's a theme that we've seen throughout our presentations, and it's no coincidence that a number of the great wineries we have had on these events. Aduna Weinart taking over from her father, Christina Vess. A lot of them have been family-run operations, and it's certainly you do see that passion that comes through into the wines.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
how fun was this?
This was great. I think we would raise a glass to everybody.
Thank you guys so much for giving us part of your day. Father's Day. I think we've got some stirrings on. I hear brunch is being prepared for us here. Rory, you're a brand new father, so how about that? Yeah, and I'm like an old father. So
a grandfather even.
Grandfather now, 2 times over. This has been really, really lovely. Thank you for this wonderful relationship, all of you at the Wine Society. It's been so huge. You guys are buying an important amount of wine from us. We very, very much appreciate the support. Please come up, and when the time is right, please come and visit us in the Napa Valley.
When our administration allows it.
When we can.
Maybe wait for next February.
Yeah. And have a great rest of the day. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there, and we love you all.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you so much. Cheers, everyone. Happy Father's Day.
Cheers.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah.
All righty.